Let's draw a staircase in our Revit model. We need to go to the Architecture tab, but then select on Stair. Select Run Center, and then change it to be Exterior Support Left, which means we'll go from the far left-hand side of the staircase on up. We'll leave offset at 0 feet 0 inches. Then for the actual run width, that means how wide should the staircase be, we'll make the staircase 3 foot 6 inches. Underneath properties, we can see that the base level, which is the bottom of the staircase, will start at the first floor. The top level is currently stopping at the second floor level. Well, what I'd like to do is make an adjustment for the thickness of the material that makes up our finished floor. So where we have the top level and second floor for the top offset, let's give this an extra 1/2 inch because that's the thickness of the material up there on the second floor. Now what we need to do is pick the spot on our first floor that we'll be drawing our staircase. In this case, it'll be down by the door, about 5 foot away from this wall. If you just move your cursor down into this area, you should get a temporary dimension that shows up. And when you see 5 feet, click. Then start to draw your staircase straight up. One of the things that you'll notice is that down toward the bottom of your staircase, it'll tell you how many risers have been created and how many risers are remaining. Once you get beyond the point where your staircase is being drawn in, I don't really care where as long as it's beyond that point, you can click in order to finish off your staircase being drawn in that direction. Select on the big green check mark to finish off our staircase. And we can see that it's going up from this point on up in this direction. Now the next thing I'd like to do is put in a section mark from here down to take a look at the way that our staircase looks inside of this view. So we need to go to the View tab on the ribbon and then select on Section. I'm just going to click in this location and then draw a section to this point. Where we have these double arrows, I'm going to pull them back to right about here. Right click when the section symbol is highlighted and then select on Go to View to take us to that section view. We can see that the stair is coming up, but then it's stopping at about this location. Unfortunately, what this means is that we currently are not tying into a floor. And there's actually 2 floors up here on the second level. There's the structural floor and then there's the finished floor material. So what we need to do is bring out that structural floor as well as the finished floor material up here on the second level so that the staircase can tie into those. We'll need to go to our second floor plan view. So underneath the project browser, scroll down until you find second floor and then double click on second floor. Then zoom in to where the top of the staircase would be. Move your cursor over here to this direction, and then when one of your floors highlights, click in order to select on that floor. For me, that's the 1/2 inch tile floor. And what I'd like to do now is bring that 1/2 inch tile floor over from this point, and then from here on up. With the floor selected, we need to come up to Edit Boundary to edit the outside boundary of our floor. Then select on Line, click at the intersection of this line, come straight across, click there. Go up to the edge of the wall. In this case, I'm actually taking that to about the edge of where the structural part of the wall might be. Come straight on across to here, click, then come down. One other thing that I really don't like is that right now this is my finished floor material and I can see that it's being drawn from here over here to the center of this column. Well, I'd really like to bring that finished floor material over so it's right in this location. The next thing I'll do is hit the Escape key a couple times on the keyboard, select on this line here, pull my mouse button down and then drag that material on over. Then I'll click out here in order to finish off that part of the line. And the next thing I'd like to do is bring this point down to here, click on the end point of this line and then just drag it straight down to that location. Now we can see that the finished floor material is coming here, going around the column and wrapping itself back around. In order to finish off this part of the floor, we can then click on the big green check mark to now have that finished material. It'll ask, would you like the walls to go up to this floor's level to attach to its bottom? The wall that's directly underneath it, do we want it to go just to the underneath side of where that finished floor material is at? The answer for this question is yes, we do want the walls to do that. But once we've done that, we now need to be able to select on the structural floor, which is underneath this finished floor, so that we can bring it out as well. Select on the Visual Styles button, then click on Wireframe. That'll make sure that we can then see through the floor. Then we'll click on a structural floor, which will be this line, and then click on Edit Boundary. What I'd like to do now is select on Line, line it up where this edge of the staircase is located at. I'll click once, come straight across, and then start to draw all the way around the perimeter here. Now, the next thing I need to do is make sure that this is one continuous line if we follow it all the way on around. Select on this line, click on the dot, and then pull it straight down to this point. I'll unjoin the element. That just means no longer connect to the endpoint of this line. Select on the boundary line, and then draw a line between this point and this point. Once that's done, we'll hit escape a couple times on the keyboard, and then select on the big green check mark to finish this floor. And just like we did with the other floor, say yes to this dialog box so that the wall goes to the underneath side. If it asks, do you want to unjoin any elements? That's okay, we'll unjoin the elements. And by doing that, we now have the structural floor going over the top of the other wall, which is right there, over here to the edge. And then we have the finished floor doing the same thing. So now we have the staircase dying into the floor in the appropriate location. Here in the second floor plan, we need to add guardrail at the edge of the second floor and then have that tie itself back into the location where the handrail for the staircase is located at. Then we also need to continue on that handrail that's leading up the staircase so that it then straightens itself out and then acts sort of like a guardrail from this point up to the wall so that nobody can walk from the second floor and then accidentally stumble and then fall off the edge. Let's start by selecting the handrail that's currently existing on this staircase. We can do that just by selecting on the rail, and if we zoom in, we can see it's this part of the staircase. Then we can select on Edit Path. We can then see this line. What I like to do is then click on Line, and then from the endpoint of that line, draw a line straight over. Now, because this line is separate from this line, that means that the slope will continue up to where this line stops, and then it will flatten out, and then we'll just have a flat railing going straight over to the wall. If we click on the big green check mark, we'll see that the railing is coming up to this point. It looks like we have a little bit of a break here, but it's actually the two railings touching each other, and then it goes straight until it touches this wall. To see this condition, we should go to a section view. So if we select on our section, right-click, and then go to View, we can now see the railing coming up, flattening out, and then dying into the wall back here. Now there is one change I'd like to make as long as I'm inside of this section view. This really isn't the kind of railing that I'd like to use. So to adjust this to a different kind of railing, let's select on the railing. Here underneath Properties on the Type Selector list, click on Handrail Glass Panel, and you'll notice that it's now changed that type of railing to be a different type of railing. If we click off of it back here, we can now see the glass panel coming all the way on up to here, flattening out, and then coming across. By the way, we also have the old style railing still in the back. I like to change that one as well. So if we highlight over that railing, click on it, then go to the Type Selector list, I like to change that to be that handrail glass panel. Now if we zoom back out, we can see that we have the glass panel coming all the way on up. So now what I'd like to do is place a guardrail from this wall straight on over. We need to once again go back to that second floor floor plan view. Click on the X. Here in the second floor floor plan view, go to the Architecture tab, but then select on Railing. Underneath Properties, what I'd like to do is place a guardrail. Go to the Guardrail Glass Panel. Then we need to draw that guardrail from this location straight up. Now the exact location to me doesn't really matter. It can always be adjusted later. And then stop it right about here. Click again, and then click right there. The guardrail will come over, and then it'll turn the corner, and then stop right there. We'll click on the big green check mark to see what happens. Notice how we now have a railing that comes up, comes across, and it stops in this location. Select on the section symbol, right-click and go to the view. We can now see that we have the guardrail coming straight across, and then it comes back in this direction. And then we also have this railing coming up and then coming across. If we want to see this a little bit better, we can come down to the bottom of the view, select on the visual style, change this to be shaded to see the different colors associated with the materials in this railing. You can have various types of stair construction in Revit, and we can see those underneath Edit Type if we select on any staircase. So inside of the section view, select the staircase itself, and then underneath properties, you'll find that you have an assembled stair, 7-inch maximum riser, 11-inch tread type here on the type selector list. For this type of stair, you could have 7-inch maximum for your risers and then 11-inch deep treads. If we wanted to choose a different type of staircase off of this type selector list, we could. So if we select on the type selector list, we can see that we have two other types of stairs currently inside of this project. One is called a cast in place staircase, monolithic stair. This would be a monolithic pour for your staircase. What you do is you end up pouring the staircase in one concrete pour. There's also an option here for a precast staircase, and each one of these has their own set of properties associated with them. Let's just focus on the properties for this assembled staircase. So select on the 7-inch maximum riser, 11-inch tread, and then click on Edit Type so that we can see the properties of this type of staircase. As the name kind of indicates, 7-inch max rise, 11-inch tread, and that's what we find here underneath the calculation rules. 7-inch for the maximum riser height, 11-inch for the minimum tread depth. To change that to be anything different, what you should do is select on Duplicate, give this a new name, ideally something that would match your riser height and depth, and then change to match the sizes that you need it. So if it needed to be a maximum riser height of 7.5 inches or 8 inches, that's where you could change it at. Underneath construction, you can change the way that your treads are actually constructed. You also have the option underneath supports to control the way that you have your strainers constructed underneath the staircase. Do you want a strainer on the left or the right-hand side of the staircase? Also, if you do decide to have a strainer, will that be a closed strainer or an open carriage strainer? If you don't want a strainer on either side, you can just put no or none. If it has none, then there won't be a strainer on that side of the staircase. There's also options for how many middle supports, how many middle strainers you'd like to have for your staircase. If you want to have a middle strainer, you just need to put a check mark there. Specify the properties of that strainer and then how many of them there needs to be. And then that's how it will be constructed, going right up the middle of your staircase. For this staircase type though, I just want to clear that checkbox out because I don't want a middle strainer. And I want to point out some extra properties which are kind of hard to tell exist underneath construction. Where we have run type, we can see that we have a 2-inch tread, 1-inch nosing, 1/4-inch riser. If we click there, we'll see over on the right-hand side, there's this little button. If you select on that button, these are the type properties for the treads. We can see here that we have the option for, do we want to have treads? Do we want to have risers? If for some reason you just want to have open treads, then you could click the checkbox next to riser, and then there won't be any risers as part of your staircase. For this kind of staircase, though, I do want to have risers in place, so I'll put a check mark there. This is where you can tell it to be slanted. You can also specify what the overall riser thickness needs to be. If there needs to be a riser that's not just your typical rectangular shape, this is where you can change it here. This is where you can specify what the overall tread thickness should be, if the tread should have its own profile shape. What's the overhang on your nosing? What's the shape of that nosing profile on the edge of your tread? Also, you can specify the materials for your tread as well as your riser. This is a great spot where you can specify that you want this to be metal or maybe a steel grate kind of material. So depending on what kind of materials that you need for your renderings as well as the way it should look inside of plan views, this is where you can set them for your treads as well as your risers. I'll click on OK. And now I do want to mention that if we selected a different type of family off of the list, we get different sets of properties. We can see those properties if we come up here to family and it says the system family. Let's choose the cast in place stair. When we do, we can see that we get a whole new variety of properties underneath this run type. Instead of what we had before with the assembled stair where we had the 2-inch tread, 1-inch nosing, and the 1/4-inch riser, if we select on the cast in place, now it says nosing. Click on the little button next to that. We have properties associated with a monolithic stair and how the construction of that monolithic stair can be put together. I'll click on OK. And the same sorts of properties apply if we change this to be a precast stair. Notice how where we have the in connection here, we now have extra lines that we did not have when we chose the cast in place stair. So each kind of staircase can have its own set of properties associated with it based off of the kind of construction of that kind of staircase. Now, if I click on OK to this, just so that we can see it, if we select on the staircase, come here to properties and go to the type selector list, choose the monolithic stair. Now, I will give a disclaimer that this could cause some issues with our railing. In fact, that's what it's giving us a warning message for now. And I'll just click the little X next to it. And that's because the staircase has different properties associated with its overall width and how it's generally constructed. So it's having a hard time putting this railing on there because this railing was really constructed for the other type of staircase. But if we zoom in, we can see that this is just a monolithic pour for the staircase and straight going all the way on down. And that's because of the properties of how that staircase is constructed. If we wanted to change it back, we could do that by coming up here at properties, change it back. The railing now corrects itself because it's lined up appropriate over the staircase. And we can see that the staircase has its strainers and general properties back of the previous type of staircase that was originally selected. Revit railings are made up of two main parts, the rail and the other is the baluster. Now, if we select on one of these railings, we'll find the properties of this railing by selecting on Edit Type. Here in the Type Parameters dialog box, we can find the rail itself as well as the balusters. Rails are anything that go from left to right inside of the railing. Balusters are those parts that go up and down or just fill in those spots in between each of the rails. To see our rails, we need to select on Edit next to Rail Structure. We can see that we have 5 rails inside of this railing. Each one of these rails is at its own height, ranging from 3'6" off of the level to just 4 inches off of the level. They can also be offset from the spot that you've drawn them in at, such as -1 inch to one side or maybe 2 inches to another side. Now, the reason why you might have an offset distance is so that you could have enough room if you're trying to hold on to the handrail without actually hitting your hand on any of the other rails. They each have their own profile shapes associated with them, which is the overall shape of it, like a square or a rectangle or a circle. And these profile shapes are just two-dimensional lines which are extruded along the path that you draw your railing in. In this example, we can see that the top 2 rails are each 1.5 inches around. And that's this rail here, as well as the rail you can just barely see behind this rail. Then we have 3 other rails, which are each 1 inch in thickness. So we got 1 inch, 1 inch, and then 1 inch right here. As far as the material properties that make up those railings, if it's set it by category, what it means is that that material will take on the properties based on the project that that railing is inserted into. Your other option is to set what that material property for the railing needs to be. So no matter what project that is placed into or whatever the material properties are set inside of that project, they'll get overridden by those materials that you specify for that type of railing. If you wanted to take a different material off of the list, you could by just selecting on by category and then clicking on the little button next to it that opens up the material browser. Then from here, you can just scroll up or down, find a material that you'd like that rail to be, select on it, click on OK, and then at that point, that railing would be made of that material. Select on Cancel, select on Cancel one more time. The other part of this rail is called the baluster. That is anything that's not going from left to right. Where we have the baluster placement, if we select on Edit, we can now see that there's actually 2 different balusters loaded in to this kind of railing family. The first one are just these posts which are going straight up and down. The second one, each of these glass panels in between each of the balusters. And you can also specify what the distance is in between each one of them with this distance from previous option. In this case, every 1 foot, 1/2 inch, you'll end up getting another panel placed here inside of the railing. Also, down toward the bottom, there's an option called posts, where you can specify the start post of the railing, end post of the railing, as well as any corner post. Now I'll click on OK, click on OK again. This kind of railing that we're currently looking at is really one of the older kinds of railings. Some of the newer railings that you have inside of Revit actually have their properties in slightly different locations. Select on the railing, take one of the newer kinds of railings off of the list, such as this guardrail rectangular. Notice how it's changed? And if we look really close, we'll see that we end up having a rail going across, another rail here, And if we go to its properties by selecting on the rail, going to edit type, we'll see that there's a top rail property, 3'6", and has the shape which is rectangular 2x2. And that's the rail that we have up here at the top. If you come up to the rail structure and select on edit, we're not really seeing anything else in here. So the question becomes, where's the other railing? If I click on cancel to that, we can see that this also has a handrail available. And we can specify, do we want the handrail to be on the left side, right side, both sides, or not even have a handrail at all? Also, there's the type property associated with the handrail here, which is 1.5 inches. So with these newer types of handrails, we can specify basic properties where the top rail and handrails actually need to be right here without actually going into the rail structure. Only on some of the more complex kinds of handrails where we need to have more of them going across would we come into the rail structure, select on edit, and then add more of those profile shapes. As far as the baluster placement is concerned, if we select on edit, the baluster placement is still basically the same. You have your rails, your spacing between those rails, in this case every 4 inches we end up getting a new baluster, as well as start post, corner post, and end post, which are all balusters. And in this case, we can see that they too are those 3/4 inch balusters. If we wanted to change this so that it was a thicker baluster, a different shaped baluster, we could click on the little down arrow and then pick just a different kind of baluster on the list. So it would have a different look for the start, corner, or end posts. Click on OK. Then click on OK one more time. Switch this back to the other kind of railing. So we'll select back on there again, come over here to properties, go to the type selector list, and then choose the guardrail glass panel to change it back to that type of railing with those type properties associated with it.